They laughed when she was sold for $5, until the cowboy who never spoke raised his hand. She stood barefoot on an overturned crate, knees bloodied, lips split, dress ripped up the side like a flag that lost the war. Sun baked the dust into every corner of the square. Men leaned on fence rails, spitting tobacco and grinning with rotten teeth. "She ain't got nothing left but bones and bad luck," someone called. Laughter followed like flies. The auctioneer slapped the post behind her, voice sharp. $5, boys. Hell, I'll throw in the rope she came tied with." More laughter. One man actually reached for his coin, then stopped. Not worth it, not even for sport. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. Her eyes weren't begging, just distant, staring past the horses and wagons like she'd already left her body behind. Then the dust shifted. From the edge of the crowd, a man moved. Coat worn to the threads, hat low, boots slow and heavy like each step had a reason. He didn't speak, didn't nod, just reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. $5, dull with time, clinked into the auction tin like thunder cracking on a clear sky. The crowd went still. Someone muttered, "He ain't said a word in years." Another chuckled low. "Guess even silence gets lonely." But he didn't look at them. He looked at her, and she, just once, looked back. Not with hope, just with a pause. Like the fall had slowed. "Sold," the auctioneer grunted, more confused than pleased. No one laughed after that. They didn't ask his name. Folks knew better. He was the kind of man who didn't give answers, only silence wrapped in dust. When he stepped down from the crowd, boots steady as bedrock, no one blocked his way. The rope that held the girl dangled from the auction post, like something forgotten. He picked it up, not to bind, just to guide. She didn't resist. Her feet moved like she wasn't sure who they belonged to. Bruised and barefoot, she followed the man through the space the crowd had carved around them. Not one person spoke. A few watched with narrowed eyes. Others turned away. The ones who had laughed earlier looked ashamed of the sound. At the edge of town, the cowboy untied the rope, dropped it in the dirt like it meant nothing. She didn't say thank you. He didn't ask for it. Instead, he walked to the Mustang waiting by the hitch post. The horse lifted its head, ears twitching, as if even it knew better than to expect noise from its rider. The man climbed into the saddle, then looked down and extended a hand. She hesitated. The last time someone offered a hand, it led to bruises and a locked door. But this time, the hand was gloved, still, waiting, not commanding. She took it. They rode out of town without a word, past the scorched fences and shuttered windows. No trail, no destination. Just the creak of old leather and the wind slipping through her hair. She didn't follow him because she trusted him. She followed him because silence for once didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the first place she hadn't needed to run from. The trail curved through scrub and stone, the sun dipping low behind the hills, spilling rust-colored light across the land. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't offer it. Just rode steady, the sway of the saddle lulling her into a silence she didn't have to fight. They crossed a narrow creek, water no deeper than her ankles, then veered into a stand of sycamores. That's where she saw it. Small, crooked, half sunk into the earth like the world had tried to swallow it once and failed. The cabin wasn't much. Slanted roof. Smoke curling soft from the chimney. No lanterns, no locks. Just wood, stone, and the hush of a place that had forgotten how to be loud. He dismounted first, tied the Mustang to the rail, then held out a hand. She climbed down without speaking. Her legs were sore, her back raw, but she walked upright. Inside, the air smelled of ash and pine. One cot in the corner, blanket folded. A second roll of bedding sat near the hearth. A chipped basin. A table with 2 chairs. Everything worn but clean. He gestured to the cot, then to himself, then to the floor. Clear enough? She sat slow, watching as he knelt by the hearth, struck a match, and coaxed a flame to life. The fire crackled low, casting shadows along the log walls. She waited, for the words, the touch, the order. It didn't come. Instead, he poured water into a tin cup, set it on the table, and stepped outside. The door stayed open. She stared at the fire, still tense, but her hands stopped shaking. In all that quiet, the strangest thing happened. She felt safe. Not saved. Not healed. Just safe. For now, it was enough. Morning came soft through the shutters, light dusting the floorboards like sugar. She stirred on the cot, stiff but unbothered. The blanket he'd left was still wrapped around her shoulders. Beside the hearth, the second bedroll sat untouched. He hadn't come back inside during the night. She rose slowly, toes curling against cold wood, and cracked the door open. He was already outside, splitting kindling with a rhythm that didn't need thought. No greeting, no glance, just the steady thud of work. By midday, a tin plate sat on the table, cornbread and dried apples. No note, no voice, just presence. That was his way. He patched the fence out back, fed the horse, cleaned his rifle on the porch with the same quiet care someone might shell peas. She started learning the rules without being told. He didn't ask where she came from. Didn't press when she flinched at sudden noises. If she didn't eat, he didn't stare. If she didn't speak, he didn't fill the space with nonsense. The first rule was quiet, but not the kind that felt like a knife. It wasn't the silence she knew from cellars and locked doors. His was something else. Room to breathe, to not explain, to not be useful. She began to relax in it, little by little, stacking wood, rinsing her tin cup, sitting on the porch and watching the sun drift low. She caught him looking once, not long, not hard, just enough to see if she was still there. When she met his gaze, he didn't look away fast. Didn't smile either. Just gave a slow nod, like maybe her being there mattered. No questions, no demands. And for the first time in a long while, silence didn't mean danger. It meant she could start existing again. Quietly. The comb showed up one morning beside the basin. Simple bone, smooth teeth, wrapped in a strip of cloth like it was something valuable. She stared at it a long time before picking it up. No note, no explanation. But she knew who had left it. That night, she used it in the flicker of the firelight, tugging careful strokes through hair that hadn't felt a comb in weeks. He didn't watch. Just sat near the hearth, polishing his boots like it was any other evening. That was how it always went. Nothing spoken, nothing expected. Just quiet gestures left where she could find them. A few days later, she found the notebook on the table. Leather cover, edges worn, a stub of pencil tucked beneath the flap. Blank pages waiting like they had all the time in the world. She didn't open it at first. Just let it sit, like it might bite if she touched it too soon. But silence does strange things when it's kind. So one morning, when the rooster was still half asleep and the fire hadn't yet caught, she flipped the notebook open and wrote 4 words in a slow, uneven hand. My name was Clara. Then beneath it, smaller. I think. She left it on the table and went outside. Couldn't bear to see his eyes on it. But when she came back, the notebook was where she'd left it. Open, undisturbed. Only a small stone sat on the page now, holding it down. A gesture. Nothing more. That night, when he handed her a tin plate for supper, his eyes met hers. No smile, no praise. Just a quiet nod. Like her name was something sacred. Like maybe it didn't have to be whole to be true. She didn't ask how to help. He never offered to teach. But in the quiet space between chores and mealtime, she began to watch. The way he moved through the yard. Slow, sure, like his boots knew every nail in the boards. How he never startled the mare, never raised his voice, never rushed anything. He didn't speak to the animals, but they listened. He didn't bark commands, just showed up and did the work like it was a kind of prayer. So she watched. Watched how he crouched to check a fence post, fingers brushing the earth first like asking permission. How he tested the latch on the chicken coop with 2 short tugs. How he paused, always paused, before stepping through the barn door, as if the building itself needed a moment to remember him. It was a rhythm. Not taught, not claimed. Just lived. And bit by bit, she fell into it. She swept the porch before sunrise, same direction he moved when grooming the horse. Clockwise, always. She filled the basin before supper, because he never said when to, but always used it right after the fire was lit. She stopped asking herself whether it was right. Just did it. Because it felt right. By the third week, they worked around each other like dancers who'd never rehearsed but somehow didn't miss a step. Once, while carrying wood, she tripped. He was there before she hit the ground, steadying her by the elbow. No words, just a hand, brief and sure, then gone again. She started walking quieter after that, placed her feet like he did, listened like he did. It wasn't mimicry. It was trust, unspoken, unconfirmed, but real enough to live inside. The stranger came just after noon, riding a bay horse with a limp and wearing a grin too big for a man traveling alone. His coat flapped open, badge long gone but the outline still visible on the leather. He tied his reins loose like he didn't expect to stay long and walked straight up the path to the porch where the cowboy was sharpening a blade. Clara heard his voice before she saw him. "Well, I'll be damned," the man chuckled, boots scraping the step. "Ain't this something? Thought I recognized that little face." She froze by the window, bowl in hand, knuckles whitening around the rim. "Could have sworn I saw you in El Paso," the man continued, "back when the marshals busted that brothel down near Water Street. What was it? 3 years? 4? The cowboy didn't speak, just looked up, slow and steady. His hand, calm as always, drifted to rest on the worn leather of his holster. Not a threat. Not yet. The stranger noticed. He raised his hands a little, grin tightening. "Easy now, just passing through. No need to get twitchy." Clara didn't move from the shadows. "I just figured if she was who I thought, might be a bounty in it. Some folks don't like when girls disappear without paying their debts." Still no reply, just that same unreadable stare. The wind shifted. A crow called out from the pines. Then the cowboy stood. Didn't draw. Didn't speak. Just stood. And that was enough. The stranger chuckled again, weaker this time. "No offense meant, friend. Just curiosity." He backed off, swung onto his horse, and rode out without looking back. Inside, Clara finally exhaled. He hadn't said a word. He didn't have to. She found it while sweeping near the hearth, the bristle catching on a warped board that rocked under her foot. She knelt, pried it loose, and reached into the hollow beneath. Dust bloomed as her fingers closed around metal, cold, scratched, but whole. A harmonica. She turned it over in her hands. Someone had etched a mark on the side, worn almost smooth. A crescent moon. She didn't ask, just left it on the table beside his chair and kept sweeping like she hadn't found anything at all. That evening, when the light bent low through the slats and the wind whispered dry through the trees, he picked it up, turned it once in his hands like a memory, then brought it to his lips. The first note was low, rough with time, but true. The melody rose slow and sweet, something made for dusk, wide and aching, like a lullaby not meant to soothe but to remember. He didn't look at her while he played. He didn't need to. She sank to the floor beside the hearth, knees drawn to her chest, breath caught sharp behind her ribs. Her eyes burned before she knew why. The tune turned a corner, and that's when it happened. "My mother used to sing that," she whispered. The words came thin, broken by the crack in her voice. She sang that to me, when I was little." He didn't stop playing, just nodded, barely, like maybe he remembered someone once sang it to him too. She covered her mouth with her hand, the tears falling quiet and sudden. It was the first thing she'd said aloud in weeks. Not a name, not a story, just a truth. And that was enough to break her wide open. The mare was waiting by the fence one morning, tied loose with a blanket folded across her back. Gray around the muzzle, eyes soft, patient as a Sunday sky. Clara stood on the porch, arms folded, watching. No words had been spoken. None were needed. He nodded toward the saddle, then stepped away. She moved slow at first, not afraid of the animal, just of what it might mean to climb on again. The last time she rode, she had been running. That memory still itched in her spine. But this time, no one chased her. She placed a hand on the mare's neck, breathed deep, and swung up. The leather creaked beneath her. The world shifted. At dawn, she walked the trail behind the cabin. Let the mare choose the pace. Watched how the shadow of her ride stretched longer than her body ever had. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just listened to the rhythm of hooves in dry grass. By noon, she trotted to the creek and back. By dusk, she was galloping. Hair wild, skirt flaring, hands firm but kind on the reins. The wind caught her laughter and threw it across the hills like something it had waited too long to carry. He watched from the porch. Didn't cheer, didn't move. Just stood with arms crossed and eyes squinting against the sun, the smallest hint of a nod breaking across his face. She didn't look back. Not to check if he was proud, not to prove anything. She was riding because she could. And the prairie didn't care where she'd been, only how steady she held the saddle now. When she dismounted at sunset, breathless and flushed, she said one word. Again. And this time, it wasn't about escape. It was about return. The smell reached them before the smoke did. Sharp, unnatural, threading through the sycamores like a warning. He dropped the feed bucket and looked up toward the ridge. Smoke curled against the sky, too thick for campfire, too close for comfort. He didn't speak. Just reached for his rifle, slung the canteen over his shoulder, and whistled once, sharp and low. Clara was already coming from the barn, eyes wide, braid undone. He didn't tell her to stay. He didn't tell her to come. He just mounted up and rode fast. She followed. The trail cut sharp through brush and shale, and the smoke thickened with every turn. Near the top, flames licked through dry grass, hungry and fast. Someone had piled kindling along the south slope, deliberate, planned. It hadn't caught full yet, but the wind was shifting. They worked without speaking. He beat back flames with his coat, Clara hauling water from the creek in an old feed bucket, bare arms streaked with soot. Smoke stung their eyes. Heat blistered the air. But they didn't stop. It took an hour to kill it. When it was done, the ridge was blackened, trees singed, earth smoking. He stood with his hands on his knees, chest rising slow. Clara crouched beside the last burning patch, watching it smolder into ash. She didn't ask who. He didn't say. But they both knew this wasn't nature. This was message. As they rode back, silence clung closer than the smoke. At the cabin, she looked over her shoulder toward the hill. Not afraid, but no longer naive. Someone wanted them gone, and for the first time she realized they had something worth burning. The notebook lay open on the table, spine broken soft from use. Each day, Clara added to it. Just a line or two, sometimes a full page. Never dates, never explanations. Just fragments, scattered like ash on a still wind. Red dress, lace at the cuffs, my mother's voice behind a door, window shattering. Cold night, a scream that wasn't mine, a man's boots, blood at the toe. He said he'd find me. She never spoke the words aloud, just pressed the pencil to paper and let the memories crawl out, one splinter at a time. He never asked. Every morning, after tending the horses, he'd read what she left. Not with judgment, not with curiosity. Just a steady presence by the table, thumb brushing the edge of the page like it might slip away. I ran. I didn't mean to. That line stayed for 3 days, untouched. She walked past it each morning, fingers grazing the edge, eyes never meeting his, until one evening, just before dusk, she returned from the creek to find another line beneath it. Sometimes running is the only thing that keeps you alive. She stared at it for a long time. He was already outside, chopping kindling like nothing had changed. But something had. That night, she wrote again. A scar on my shoulder. He gave it to me. Said I talked too much. I think I stopped talking that day. He read it in silence. Didn't look at her. Didn't touch her hand. Just left a folded piece of cloth on the table before dawn. Inside, a salve he made from pine resin and beeswax. No one said healing. But she opened it anyway. And that was enough. Word always traveled faster than it should. A rider came through town. A lawman, stiff-backed and sharp-eyed, the kind that wore his badge like a blade. He asked too many questions in too short a time. Said he was looking for a girl. Young. Scar on her shoulder. Said she'd run from a legal house in El Paso. Took something that wasn't hers. Claimed a cowboy rode with her now. Quiet one. Doesn't talk. Clara heard it from the general store girl, who came by to borrow flour, and left with a face pale as milk. She dropped the bag of cornmeal and froze. Her breath went shallow, her hands, fists. He watched her from the porch, didn't ask, just handed her the satchel and nodded toward the cellar. She went. Didn't argue. Didn't cry. By dusk, he saddled his horse. Took the long rifle, not the short one. Wrote nothing, said even less. But when he mounted up, he turned once toward the woodshed, where she watched through the slats, and tipped his hat. It wasn't goodbye, just a promise. He rode into town just as the sun began to die behind the ridge. Found the lawman at the saloon, boots on the rail, stories leaking from his mouth like they were worth something. The cowboy didn't speak. He didn't have to. The room hushed when he stepped inside, dust rising around his boots like memory. The lawman looked up, saw the silence staring back at him. "Well, I'll be," the man muttered. "You're real." The cowboy stood still, didn't nod, didn't blink. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the lawman suddenly forgot how to grin. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't the one doing the questioning anymore. The warrant was yellowed, folded twice, ink faded but the words still sharp. The lawman laid it flat on the saloon table, one hand on the paper, the other resting too close to his sidearm. "She's property of a legal house," he said, loud enough for the barkeep to hear. "Ran in 73. Scar on the left shoulder. Took a brooch and a bottle of laudanum. That's theft. That's 5 years minimum." The cowboy didn't move. Just set down a small envelope, edges curled, seal cracked. "What's this?" the lawman asked, eyes narrowing. He didn't answer, just stared. Inside was a letter. Old, but clean. Written in the same thin, steady hand that filled the notebook back home. It told of girls locked in basements. Names exchanged for coin. Men with badges looking the other way. A judge paid off in cattle. It was signed, not with a name, but with a mark. A crescent moon. The lawman read it once, then again slower. "This ain't proof," he muttered, but his voice was thinner now. "No signature. Could be anyone." The cowboy reached into his coat and pulled out a second paper. A deed. Burned along one edge. Still legible. Property lines. Signatures. One belonged to the brothel's owner, another to the man who filed the warrant. The lawman went quiet. "They torched the place not long after this letter made the rounds," someone said from the bar. No one claimed the voice. "Burned to the ground. No one charged. All girls gone." The cowboy stood still. The letter lay there like a match daring someone to strike. "She ain't a fugitive," a voice said behind him. Clara, quiet but steady. "She's the reason they burned." The lawman looked at her, then at the silent man who never left her side. He folded the warrant and walked out. They left before sunrise, the world still hushed and silvered in mist. He saddled the horses in silence, checked the cinches twice. When he turned, she was already dressed. Blue calico, the one he'd left folded in a box by her cot weeks ago and never mentioned. It fit her like a memory softened by time. She reached for the reins. He didn't speak, just placed them in her hands and mounted his own. She climbed up without help. They rode side by side. Past the river that once carried ash, past the ridge where smoke nearly took them, past the place where she first said her name like it might break. Now she said nothing. Neither did he. But the quiet between them had changed. It wasn't silence anymore. It was something earned. The county hall sat crooked on Main, sun glinting off the windows like it knew what was coming. Folks gathered as they dismounted. Townspeople, ranch hands, women with aprons and weathered hands. All watching. Inside, the air was heavy with the weight of waiting. She stepped to the front. He stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes fixed ahead like stone. She unfolded the paper slow. "My name is Clara," she said, voice low but clear. The hall was packed tighter than a Sunday sermon. Men with dust on their boots and guilt in their eyes sat shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, hats clutched between trembling hands. No judge, no jury. Just benches and a podium, and the truth straining at the seams. Clara stood alone at the front, her boots scuffed, hair braided tight, voice steady. "You knew," she said, not loud, but clear. "All of you. You saw the girls disappear, heard the screams. You let it happen." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone shifted. Another coughed. She pulled out the deed, the letter. A scorched map with lines leading back to names everyone recognized. Men who sat in that very room. She named them. Not with malice, with memory. "You took the brooch," she said to one. "Signed the transport papers," to another. "Closed your door when you heard her cry." No one laughed. A man near the back, red-faced and shaking, stood. "You got no right," he snarled. "A whore don't get to preach." His hand went for his hip. The cowboy moved before the insult hit the ground. No words. No warning. He crossed the room like thunder with no storm, and in one clean motion, slammed the man's wrist against the bench hard enough to drop the gun. The metal clattered. The man groaned. Silence returned, deeper now, like the room itself was holding its breath. The cowboy didn't draw. He didn't need to. He just looked. And this time, when Clara spoke again, no one interrupted. They listened. Because truth, when spoken by someone who survived it, doesn't beg for permission. It demands it. And for once, the town gave it. The sun melted low over the trees, painting the world in honey and hush. Wind slipped through the cottonwoods, soft as a breath. The cabin stood the same as it always had, wood creaking, porch leaning, door swinging loose on its hinge. But something in the air felt different. Settled. Clara knelt by the porch rail, sleeves rolled, hands steady. A plank of pine rested across her lap. She carved slow, each stroke deliberate. No flourish. No fear. Just 5 letters burned into wood like she was claiming something that had long been hers. Clara's place. He sat a few steps back, elbows on his knees, watching. Not because he didn't trust her with the blade, but because he knew this part wasn't his to help with. It was hers. Fully. She finished just as the light bent gold across the field. Blew the dust from the carving, ran a thumb across the grain, and held it up. He looked at it for a long while. Then stood. His boots creaked across the porch as he walked to where she sat. She didn't move, just held his gaze like she had that day on the crate. Broken, bruised, but unbowed. His mouth opened, slow, like the word had to come from somewhere deeper than the throat, like it had lived in silence too long to be spoken without cost. Clara. Just that. Quiet. Steady. Real. She didn't cry. Didn't speak. Only placed the sign on the railing and leaned against his side, her shoulder brushing his. It wasn't a beginning. Not anymore. It was a name returned. And in that small sliver of golden silence, she knew. Some things don't have to be said twice to last forever.